Welcome to our deep dive today. We're tackling talent management and all that. We'll be exploring your excerpts from First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham and Kurt Kaufman. This book, well, it really shook things up in the management world, and it's all based on some incredible research from Gallup. They surveyed a massive number of managers and employees to figure out, really, what makes a great manager tick, you know?
What's fascinating about this research, it's not just theories,
Yeah,
it's real-world data, like connecting what employees actually think to, well, the tangible stuff,
yeah,
like productivity, even things like customer satisfaction.
yeah, I see what you mean. And the book, it starts off with this gripping story about a shipwreck back in the 1700s. Might seem like a strange place to start, but stick with me. It illustrates, I think, perfectly how crucial it is to measure the right things.
Imagine, okay, you're the admiral of a fleet, right? And you're sailing towards land, but you can't accurately measure your longitude. You know it's important, longitude, but you don't have the right tools. That's, well, tragically, what happened in the Scilly Isles disaster. And the book argues, a lot of companies today, they're making a similar mistake when it comes to their employees. They know, of course, that keeping great people is crucial, but they often, well, they miss the mark on what to actually measure to keep those employees happy and engaged.
Okay, so how did they crack the code on what to actually measure?
They really went deep. Countless interviews, focus groups, tons of number crunching. Picture them, sifting through mountains of data like those old prospectors panning for gold, except their gold was, well, those nuggets of employee feedback, the ones that had the strongest connection to high performance.
Okay, so what did they discover? Did they find, like, some secret formula or something?
Well, not a formula exactly, but they did pinpoint 12 key questions that consistently, well, linked to better performance across the board, really. And when employees gave high scores on these questions, like a 5 out of 5, it usually meant their teams were, well, they were knocking it out of the park in terms of productivity, profitability, even customer satisfaction.
So what are these 12 magic questions then?
Well, I won't list them all now, but the top 6, I think they're super relevant for any workplace. Do I know what is expected of me at work? Do I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right? At work, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? In the last 7 days, have I received recognition or praise for doing good work? Does my supervisor or someone at work seem to care about me as a person? Is there someone at work who encourages my development?
You know, it's interesting. So many of those, they really emphasize the manager. It's not just about policies or fancy perks from the company.
That's exactly it. That's what the research uncovered, the manager's impact. Bigger than company-wide stuff. Great managers, really, they're like the bedrock of a high-performing team.
Right. So anyone listening, if you want a team, that's firing on all cylinders, getting those consistent top scores, it's a pretty good indicator that you're on the right track.
Now, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about individuality. Buckingham and Kaufman use this parable. The scorpion and the frog. You familiar with that one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That scorpion, not someone you want to be stuck with.
Exactly. It's a classic. And it highlights a truth, really, about human nature. We are who we are. Just like, well, you can't change a scorpion's instinct to sting. You can't force someone to be something they're not.
Okay, so what does this scorpion and frog, what does that have to do with work?
Well, the book argues that great managers, they understand this. They don't waste time trying to fix people's weaknesses. Instead, they focus on maximizing their existing talents. It's a pretty big shift from, well, traditional management thinking, right? Which often emphasizes identifying and correcting weaknesses.
I can see how that could be a game changer. But how do you identify those talents? It's not always obvious, is it?
That's where this idea of the mental filter comes in. Everyone, well, we see the world through our own unique lens, shaped by our individual talents. Think of it like, well, we all have this mental filter that colors how we, well, perceive and react to information.
So even if you give the same training
Yeah,
to a whole group of people, their talents are going to influence how they use it.
exactly. And that leads to a really important point. Performance, it isn't just effort or training, it's also talent. The book has some, well, compelling examples. For instance, truck drivers. They all get the same training. But some will just naturally excel because their mental filters make them, well, more attuned to safety and efficiency.
It's like their brains are wired for it.
Exactly. Same with customer service reps. Those with a natural talent for, well, empathy and communication. They'll often be more successful. They connect with customers on a deeper level. Even in tough situations, they genuinely enjoy interacting with people, finding solutions, and it shines through.
So fascinating how, like, our brains are wired to be good at certain things. Makes you wonder, how much is nature versus nurture?
Well, the book talks about some research from the decade of the brain, which suggests that, well, our fundamental talents are heavily influenced by our genetics and by early childhood experiences. So we can learn and grow, of course, throughout our lives. But our natural talents, they tend to be pretty stable.
So it's not about limiting potential. It's about understanding that we all have areas where we shine.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next big question. Skills, knowledge, talents. How do we tell them apart? They're often used interchangeably, but the book makes a clear distinction.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Think about, learning a musical instrument. Skills are the techniques you learn, things like scales or chords. Knowledge is the theory behind it, like reading music or understanding harmony. But talent, that's the innate ability, makes some people, naturally gifted musicians.
So you could have amazing technique, deep knowledge of music, but without that natural ear, you'll never be truly great.
Yeah, great way to put it. The talent, it's that underlying aptitude. It makes learning and mastering certain skills, easier and more enjoyable, like having a head start.
This makes me think about all those times I struggled learning something new. Maybe I was trying to develop a skill that just didn't align with my talents.
It's something to consider, and the book argues that this confusion between skills, knowledge, and talents, it can lead to, a lot of frustration and wasted effort at work. Companies try to train people in areas where they just, don't have the natural aptitude, and that can be demoralizing for the employee and the manager.
Like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So how can managers avoid that trap then?
That's a great question. Leads us to one of the biggest challenges, balancing the need for control and consistency with the reality of individual differences.
Sounds like a, delicate balancing act. You need everyone on the same page. But you also don't want to stifle their individuality and creativity.
Exactly. The book argues that the solution is focusing on outcomes, not steps. So instead of micromanaging how people do their work, define what you want them to achieve. Give them the freedom to figure out how to get there, using their talents.
Trusting your people, basically.
Yeah.
But isn't there a risk that, if you give people too much freedom, things get chaotic?
It's a common concern, and the book addresses that. They use this cautionary tale about the Madeline Hunter method. It's a teaching approach, became so rigid, so formulaic, that it actually, stifled creativity in the classroom.
Too much control backfiring, basically.
Precisely. And the book argues, this steps mindset, it can be just as damaging at work. It can breed distrust, assuming the worst in people. Create a culture of, mediocrity by focusing on just the bare minimum. And it can stifle those moments of genuine human connection, which are so crucial in fields like customer service, for example.
So it's not about abandoning all processes or standards. It's about understanding when they're necessary.
Exactly. There are situations where steps are essential. Accuracy and safety are paramount, like financial regulations or medical procedures. But even in those cases, there's still room for individual talent to shine.
Right. Finding that balance between structure and, freedom.
And speaking of freedom, this whole idea of focusing on outcomes, it has implications for, how we think about careers. It challenges that traditional career ladder idea, where everyone is expected to climb the same path, regardless of their talents or aspirations.
So you're saying the classic, climb the corporate ladder might not be the best for everyone.
Exactly. Buckingham and Kaufman, they argue that the traditional career ladder, it's based on a flawed assumption that success on one rung, it guarantees success on the next. But in reality, the skills, knowledge, and talents you need, they can be totally different, even for roles that seem similar on the surface.
So someone could be a great individual contributor, but struggle as a manager.
Precisely. And promoting people into roles that don't fit their talents, it can be disastrous, not just for them, but for the whole organization. They tell a story about Mark, a war correspondent. He was brilliant in fast-paced, unpredictable environments, thrived under pressure, knack for getting the story, but when he was promoted, a more political role in Washington, he floundered.
So set up to fail, basically, because the new role needed totally different talents.
Exactly. A cautionary tale for any organization that values, upward mobility over individual strengths.
So if the career ladder's broken, what's the alternative? How do you create that sense of growth and progress without pushing everyone up the same path?
That's where things get really interesting. Buckingham and Kaufman, they propose this idea: heroes in every role. Instead of valuing management above all else, they say companies should celebrate expertise in all positions, recognize and reward people for being the best at what they do, regardless of their title or position.
That's a big shift, isn't it? Recognizing that not everyone wants to be a manager. that there are other paths to, well, fulfillment and success.
Exactly. But how do you put that into practice? How do you make sure people feel valued for their contributions, even if they're not, on the management track?
That's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore some companies that are doing this really well and dive into some strategies for, well, for managing, for strengths, in a way that unlocks, individual and organizational potential.
So we've established that the traditional career ladder, maybe it needs some rethinking, but what does that actually look like in practice? How do you create a system where people can grow and thrive without necessarily, climbing those management ranks?
It's about recognizing that, well, success can take many forms. Buckingham and Kaufman, they highlight companies that are doing this really well. Some companies use a system of, graded levels of achievement, where employees can progress within their field and gain recognition for their expertise, even if they don't become managers.
So like leveling up in a video game, gaining experience and mastery, but not switching to a different character class. I like that analogy. Exactly. And some companies use what they call broad-banded compensation systems, which allows employees to earn higher salaries based on their expertise, not just their position in the hierarchy. It's a way of saying, we value you, even if you're not, leading a team.
Those are some great examples. Sounds like these companies are really, walking the walk. But let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about hiring. If you want a team of superstars, you need to be able to, well, spot those hidden talents early on. Does the book offer any guidance on that?
Absolutely. Buckingham and Kaufman dedicate a whole section to what they call interviewing for talent. It's about going beyond, the typical resume review and those canned questions. It's about digging deeper to uncover those natural aptitudes, see if they really align with the role.
Okay, so let's say I'm ready to start, interviewing for talent. Where do I even begin?
Yeah. First step is to create a space for that. Separate the talent interview from the rest of the hiring process. Don't get bogged down in salary or company policies during this conversation. Keep the focus solely on uncovering those natural talents, how they might shine in this specific role.
That makes sense. Create an environment where the candidate feels comfortable, sharing their strengths and, their passions without feeling pressured by, well, the other stuff.
Exactly. Now, the questions themselves. Focus on open-ended questions, the kind that encourage the candidate to share specific stories from their past. Remember, past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior.
So instead of asking, are you a good team player? You'd ask, tell me about a time when you had to work as part of a team to achieve a difficult goal, something like that.
Precisely. And then listen carefully to how they describe the situation. Did they take initiative, demonstrate leadership, collaborate effectively? Their answer will reveal a lot more than a simple yes or no.
It's not just what they say, it's how they say it. What other clues should I be listening for?
One key indicator is, rapid learning. Ask about roles they picked up quickly or activities that come naturally to them. If they can easily recall instances where they learned something new with ease, it's a good sign that, the skills and knowledge they acquired were just reinforcing a mental pattern that was already there, a talent.
So if someone learned a new software program in days, while others were still struggling after weeks, that could be a sign of, a natural talent for tech or problem solving.
Exactly. It's about looking for those moments where someone excelled without even, really trying. Another clue is, what motivates them? What kind of work gets them excited? What do they find deeply fulfilling? The things that energize us, they're often tied to our natural talents.
So it's like those people who get super passionate about a hobby. You can just tell they're in their element.
Exactly. The book gives an example about sales. Even the best salespeople, they experience call reluctance, that fear of picking up the phone, facing rejection.
Yeah, understandable. Putting yourself out there can be intimidating.
But what separates the top performers is how they react to that fear. So, a good interview question. How do you feel when a prospect doubts what you're saying?
That's a really good question. Goes beyond just asking about their techniques, right?
Right.
Gets to the heart of, their mindset.
Exactly.
What would you be looking for in their answer?
For a truly talented salesperson, they'd say something like, it motivates me to prove them wrong, or it makes me work harder to win them over. They see doubt as a challenge, not a personal attack.
Whereas a less talented salesperson might, get discouraged or defensive.
Precisely. The way someone reacts, it can reveal a lot about their talents. It's about looking beyond the surface.
Okay, so we've got a clearer picture of, how to interview for talent. But what about once they're hired? How do you manage them in a way that focuses on their strengths and helps them grow?
Buckingham and Kaufman lay out a pretty simple performance management routine. It's all about regular conversations, both formal and informal, where the manager and employee discuss performance goals and areas for growth.
So not just those annual performance reviews,
Right.
more frequent check-ins, a real dialogue.
Exactly. And those conversations shouldn't just be about, evaluating past performance. They should focus on the future. Instead of dwelling on mistakes, shift the focus to what the employee can achieve, how they can leverage their strengths.
That's a refreshing perspective. But aren't we neglecting weaknesses if we only focus on strengths?
It's a valid point. You're not ignoring weaknesses altogether, but you address them strategically in a way that supports their growth without trying to force them to be something they're not.
So how do you do that?
First step is acknowledging that, weaknesses exist. Even the most talented people, they have areas where they struggle. But instead of trying to turn a weakness into a strength, which is, often a futile effort, the book suggests 3 alternative approaches.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The first option is to devise a support system. Think about, someone with poor eyesight. They can't magically fix their vision, but glasses or contacts provide support, allow them to function well.
So finding tools or strategies to compensate.
Exactly.
Maybe that means like giving them access to specific software or pairing them with a colleague who's strong in that area.
Right. The second option is to find a complementary partner. This is where teamwork really, shines. When you pair someone who's weak in one area with someone who's strong in that same area, you create synergy.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Exactly. The book has examples of, successful partnerships where each person's strengths balanced out the other's weaknesses, leading to great results.
Finding the right fit.
Right.
I love that. What's the third option?
The third option, when the first 2 aren't feasible, is to find an alternative role where that weakness won't be a major obstacle. They tell this story about John, a naturally gifted salesperson who was stuck in a support role and just, miserable.
I remember that story. His manager, Mandy, she recognized his talent for connecting with people.
Yeah.
And moved him into sales where he thrived.
It's a perfect example. Sometimes it's not about fixing the person. It's about finding the right environment.
So when it comes to managing for strengths, it's not about ignoring weaknesses. It's about addressing them strategically and finding creative solutions.
Exactly. And individualize your approach. Just like talents vary, so will the best way to manage those weaknesses. What works for one person might not work for another.
It's about treating people as individuals.
Exactly.
Okay, back to the performance management routine. What are some specific things managers can do during those conversations to, encourage growth, keep their employees engaged?
Buckingham and Kaufman outline this tool. They call it the strengths interview. It's a set of questions designed to help the manager really understand the employee's talents, goals, and needs.
Okay, give us a sneak peek at those questions.
They start by exploring past experiences, asking about what they enjoyed most in previous roles, what brought them to their current position, what kind of activities they find fulfilling. It's like mapping out their history of, satisfaction and success.
Looking for patterns, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then the questions shift to the present, asking about what they're currently doing well, what they'd like to be doing more of, what kind of support they need. It's a two-way street. The manager's learning about the employee, but the employee is also reflecting on their own strengths and areas for growth.
It's a great way to foster self-awareness.
Right. And finally, the questions focus on the future, asking about long-term career goals and how the manager can help them achieve those, creating a shared vision for success.
The strengths interview sounds really powerful. But how often should managers be having these?
Ideally, it's an ongoing process. Buckingham and Kaufman recommend a formal strengths interview at least once a year, but they also emphasize frequent, informal check-ins. It's about creating a culture of open communication.
So not just one big meeting, but weaving those conversations into everyday work life.
Exactly. And they suggest a brief performance planning meeting every quarter to discuss progress, set goals for the next 3 months, identify any roadblocks.
Setting mini milestones. And during those quarterly meetings, it's important to focus on what they're doing well, how they can continue to, leverage their strengths.
Absolutely. And they offer some helpful questions. Like you might start by asking, looking back over the last 3 months, what are you most pleased about? It starts things on a positive note.
Boost morale.
Exactly.
What other questions do they suggest?
You could ask, what's been most difficult for you?
Hmm.
Creating a safe space to share struggles.
Turning challenges into well, opportunities.
Right. They also suggest asking about any new skills or knowledge they've gained, highlighting the importance of, well, continuous learning.
Growth isn't just about promotions.
Exactly.
It's about evolving, expanding your skill set.
Right. And once you've discussed past performance, the conversation should shift to the future. You could ask, what's your main focus for the next 3 months? Getting clarity on their goals.
And then what are the key things you want to accomplish?
Exactly. And finally, understand what support they need. Ask, what can I do to help you achieve those goals? Making sure they have the resources and guidance they need.
Being a coach, a mentor.
Exactly.
The book also emphasizes self-tracking, right?
Absolutely. They encourage employees to keep a record of their goals, successes, learnings, a tool for self-reflection and accountability.
Like a strengths journal.
Exactly.
That self-awareness is crucial for, well, long-term development.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered hiring, performance management, but what about those situations where an employee just, oh, they're not a good fit? How do you handle that? It's a tough conversation, but probably something most managers have to face.
It is tough, and it requires a balance of honesty and compassion. Buckingham and Kaufman call this tough love. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most caring thing you can do is to help them find a role that truly plays to their strengths, even if that means, letting them go.
Like ripping off a Band-Aid.
Exactly.
It might hurt at first, but it's better in the long run. Letting someone go is never easy. But are there ways to do it, respectfully?
Absolutely.
I think that's something a lot of managers struggle with.
It is.
They want to be kind, but also honest.
Right.
What's the best way to approach it?
Be direct and honest. Explain why the role isn't a good fit, why it's in their best interest to move on. But frame it in a way that focuses on their talents, not their weaknesses. Remind them what they're good at. Encourage them to find a role that utilizes those strengths.
You're not just saying you're fired.
Yep.
You're providing context. You're framing it as an opportunity.
Exactly. And offer support during the transition. Help them update their resume, practice interviewing, connect them with people. It's about showing that you care about their future.
Even if it's not, well, at your company.
Right.
Parting ways on good terms.
Exactly.
Now, the book also talks about the manager's role in helping employees find the right fit within the company. It's not just about promotions. It's about recognizing those multiple paths to growth.
Create heroes in every role, right? It's about celebrating expertise in all positions.
And they give examples of how companies can do this. Things like graded levels of achievement, broad-banded compensation.
Exactly. Ways to reward employees for their expertise, even if they're not, on that traditional management track. Creating a culture where people feel valued, regardless of their title.
And they share those inspiring stories of individuals who found fulfillment outside that conventional climb.
Like Mary, the massage therapist. Miserable as a manager, but rediscovered her passion working directly with clients.
The importance of self-awareness.
Right.
Finding work that aligns with your talents and passions.
Absolutely.
Success isn't one size fits all.
Right.
The key is to find what brings you joy.
Exactly.
And to pursue it. This brings us to, I think, a crucial point. The manager's role in fostering self-discovery.
Managers have a responsibility to create an environment that encourages exploration.
You can't always expect employees to figure it all out on their own.
Right. Great managers, they take the time to get to know their employees, their strengths, weaknesses, goals, dreams, even their lives outside work. They build relationships based on trust, and they use that understanding to guide employees.
Seeing the potential in each person.
Exactly.
And one way to do that is through, trial periods.
Exactly. Trial periods give employees the freedom to try out different roles or projects. Without feeling trapped or fearing failure, they can explore, experiment, discover.
It's like a safety net for career exploration.
Precisely. And the book emphasizes familiarity doesn't breed contempt, it breeds understanding. The more you know about your employees, the better equipped you'll be to guide them.
So it's not just about being a boss, it's about being a mentor.
Right.
A coach.
Exactly.
Learning a work environment where people feel valued and supported.
Absolutely.
Now, this all might sound great in theory, but how does it play out in the real world?
Well, the book provides lots of real-world examples and case studies. It's really inspiring to see how these principles are being applied in so many different industries and contexts. Shows that this approach isn't just, a feel-good philosophy. It's practical, it's effective.
Give us some highlights then. What can companies actually do to create this kind of strengths-based culture?
One key action is to clearly define the talents required for each role. This involves going beyond, those generic job descriptions, really understanding what makes someone exceptional, identifying those core talents that are essential.
Like a talent blueprint.
Exactly.
You're not just looking for someone who can check off a list of skills.
Right.
You're looking for someone whose talents actually align with the demands.
Exactly. And once you have that blueprint, you can start incorporating it into your practices. Hiring, training, performance management. You can look for those talents in candidates, tailor training programs to develop those talents, structure performance evaluations around those talents.
So instead of trying to, fit everyone into the same mold, you're looking for individuals whose talents match the role. Exactly.
And the book emphasizes this isn't just about individual performance. It's about company culture.
It is.
Valuing individual strengths.
It's about creating an environment where people feel appreciated for who they are, not for their ability to conform.
They offer some tips on how to do that, right?
They do. Things like creating opportunities for employees to share their talents,
Right.
recognizing and rewarding those who use their strengths, promoting a culture of continuous learning.
Making strengths a core part of the company.
Exactly.
It's about celebrating what makes people unique.
And using those strengths to drive, success.
Now, all this brings up a question. What about those managers who they don't get it? What if they're resistant to this whole approach?
That's a great question. Changing habits can be tough.
Yeah.
But the book offers some advice. First, make the business case. Share the data from Gallup's research. The link between employee engagement and things like productivity, profitability. Show them the bottom line.
Exactly. And then focus on the practical stuff. Give concrete examples of how this approach can improve hiring, boost team performance.
Make it tangible.
Exactly. And finally, encourage them to try it out on a small scale. Implement some of the techniques with their own team.
Lead by example.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes this is a journey. Both individuals and organizations, they'll need to continuously learn and adapt. It's not about finding the perfect formula. It's about, embracing a growth mindset.
Being open to new ideas.
Exactly.
Well, that about covers everything from your excerpts. We've covered a lot. Measuring the right things, interviewing for talent, creating heroes in every role.
We've really gone deep, exploring how to identify and nurture strengths to achieve success.
Amazing how much practical stuff we got from just those excerpts. But before we wrap up our deep dive, let's zoom out for a second. What are some of the things that really stuck with you?
I think one of the most powerful things is that great managers, they don't try to change people, like their fundamental nature. They recognize that everyone has talents and they build on those, not try to fix, what's wrong.
Yeah, I agree. And the book really shows that this isn't just about making people happy. It's about the business doing better.
Absolutely. When people use their talents, they're more engaged, more productive, more likely to stay. And that means a more successful company.
Another thing that stuck with me is how important communication is, both when you're hiring and, throughout their time at the company.
Transparency is key. Make sure potential hires know what the role is, what's expected, and once they're hired, talk regularly about their progress, their goals, their challenges.
They're creating a culture of, open dialogue.
Exactly. That builds trust, psychological safety. People feel like they can take risks, be creative.
Yeah, that's so important. The book also challenges that whole career ladder idea, right?
It does. It argues that it doesn't always work.
Doesn't always serve people well.
Right. They advocate for, remember, heroes in every role.
Yeah, celebrating those experts.
Exactly. Recognizing and rewarding people for being great at what they do, even if they don't want to, manage others.
It's about valuing those different paths.
And recognizing that growth, it isn't always linear. Sometimes the best moves, they involve, sideways steps or even steps back that lead to a better fit in the long run.
A lot of people listening can probably relate to that. I think we've all had those moments, right? Wondering if we're on the right track.
It's normal. The key is being honest with yourself about what you enjoy, what you're good at, and then finding those opportunities.
And if those opportunities aren't there at your current job, don't be afraid to look elsewhere.
Exactly.
So wrapping up, what's one piece of advice for someone who's feeling stuck?
I'd say take some time for yourself. Reflect. What are you truly good at? What do you enjoy so much that you lose track of time? What work makes you feel energized? Once you understand your strengths, your passions, you can start to see those opportunities.
Great advice. And remember, this is ongoing, right? Your talents, your interest, they change.
They do.
It's important to check in with yourself.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. Talk to your manager, a mentor, a career counselor. Find people who can help you, well, see your strengths and explore options.
This whole journey of, discovering your talents, it's an adventure. And you don't have to go it alone.